is a fucking champion when it comes to being a thorn in the deep state's ass. You guys know him, the deep state marauder, Ivan Raiklin. I'm going to bring him in right now. He's a former Green Beret, a lawyer, and someone who has been an absolute thorn, I guess, in the deep state's ass, exposing them, bringing them out into the light, and telling people the truth about what is really happening. So I'm looking forward to this interview. It's been a long time coming. I got a lot of requests for him. And so, Ivan.
All right. Hopefully my battery doesn't die. I just plugged in. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, man. Good to have you.
Yeah, excellent. Fantastic intro. I like to say that I'm the ice pick, right?
The ice pick, all right.
For the deep state.
Well, you know what? Right. Whatever it is those son of a bitches got to get taken down, and it's about time that they got exposed. And it's good that we have this kind of the situation with information these days to where we have taken back over the idea of information, as General Flynn would say. We've taken back over the domain of information to where the mainstream media no longer controls the narrative to such a large degree. It's people like you, it's people like me, it's people in this audience. It's shows like this, shows like what you guys do over with the Raiklin Report and everything. So it's important that people listen to Ivan's story because he's got a good one to tell. Ivan, I want you to start just a little bit of your background and tell us about kind of how you got involved with all this.
Yeah, before I start, I want to say one thing. So I connected on my restream as well. Sure. For those that are on Facebook that are watching this video, I'm shutting you down, and same thing with CommiTube. Because guess what? I need you to bankrupt those organizations. So guess what? You want to listen to the show? Go over to Rumble, X, or any of the other free speech platforms. So I'm cutting you off. Bye.
Uh-oh.
And there you go. Now that we're only streaming on X, what was your question?
Well, tell us a little bit about you. How did you get started in all this? I mean, you spent 25 years, is that correct, in the United States Army, right?
Yeah, so I have a unique background. And the easiest way to kind of frame it in the general sense is I spent 25 years in our national security ecosystem, primarily spanning the Department of Defense, intelligence community, and special operations communities, kind of in those different categories, right? Mm-hmm. So in more detail, I would say I spent time in the active guard reserves and like as a Green Beret, intelligence officer, military diplomat, different assignments. And then at the tactical, operational, strategic level, in terms of intelligence disciplines, I focused on counterintelligence, human intelligence, as well as analysis, right? And then in terms of special operations, I had the opportunity to lead a detachment to Central America, countering the MS-13, and then as a company commander, countering ISIS in the Middle East. And also, since I was in the Texas National Guard commanding that Special Forces unit, I also was there during Hurricane Harvey, where we conducted humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, domestic mission during that time frame. So in the collective, I've countered ISIS, Taliban, MS-13, Russian aggression, 5 continents, 5 languages, and picked up, because at times I was in the reserves or the guards, so I picked up a law degree, focused on national security law, constitutional law, and really my last assignments that really inform on how many people consider me a credible source is because I spent 3.5 years teaching intelligence analysis, intel support to multinational operations, and what's known as the National Intel Course to our U.S. intelligence community analysts and our international partners, okay, at the premier military intelligence institution in our entire government, right, or arguably Intel. So I'm not the stupidest guy in the room, and the context that I bring to the conversation is that I used to teach the analytic process to intelligence professionals, critical thinking, creative thinking. I also know our intel community up, down, left, right, down to the pixel, basically, of who does what and how they do it, right? because I had to know it to be able to teach it. Also experienced it over a couple decades. And then understanding the global order with one of the courses that I taught, Intel Support to Multinational Operations, whether it's UN led, whether it's US led, whether it was European Union led, or other coalitions and international government or intergovernmental organizations. So while I was doing that as a contractor in support of the Defense Intelligence Agency, I was in the reserves in my last assignment before I retired. Now, what was that? I was on the East Coast full-time, if you will, teaching. And part-time in the reserves, I was a technology scout in the San Francisco and Greater Bay Area, meaning Silicon Valley. My role was to identify technologies and companies in the artificial intelligence, mixed reality, and gaming industries that could bring in a capability into the Army to improve our national security in the Army and more broadly in the Department of Defense. Okay. And try to basically explain how they can go through and work their product through the Army procurement cycle. So bi-coastal, understanding Silicon Valley and people, right, and relationships, and the landscape geographically, and then in DC as well. The people, the missions, the places, etc. That gives me probably the most unique perspective of anybody creating content related to the problems that we are seeing from both of those coasts. Okay. On top of that, as a lawyer, right? So analyst, lawyer, Green Beret. So I have the ability to look at things in a unique fashion using all that collective skill set and all the networks that come with having gone through a quarter of a century of working in those various spheres. So that's probably one of the most detailed, in-depth, contextualized introductions of my background, I think, that you're going to get in order to understand why I'm able to get down to the pixel level in all of this.
Awesome. Appreciate your service, brother. I served 10 years in the United States Navy. Nothing near what you did.
Nice.
But, yeah, I loved it, man. Loved every minute of it. Did counter narcotics in the South Pacific with the Coast Guard lead-up. I was a member of the Visit Board Search and Seizure Team. I worked on missile gunfire control systems. So had a great time. It was my last duty station, Washington, D.C., 2008. And that's when I was at the Washington Navy Yard.
Okay,
MDW.
Navy Yard. Yeah, yep. I've been through there a few times.
Yep. So I was down there, and I got to see what Washington, D.C. was really about, and it's what really kind of changed my perspective. I was red-pilled prior to that moment, but I really didn't care too much about politics. But then you get down to Washington, D.C., and you start to kind of see how the whole arena is run. And Barry had just came in. Barack Obama had just came
Barry
in.
Hussein. Yeah.
Yeah. And Ron Paul was really big back then, and I was a staunch supporter of Ron Paul. And I was running a whole bunch of different events for Ron Paul during that time while I was active duty. And I met a lot of people out there. And you get some information, and I just wanted to get as far away from Washington, D.C. as humanly possible when he came in. And I ended up getting out at 10 years and moving to Colorado in the middle of the country because I thought it was imminent that we were going to be going to World War III at some point in time under Obama, just because he was, that infiltrated at that aspect. So it's interesting because it's around that time, 2008 to 2012, where the base foundation of a lot of the things that are happening today were kind of laid. I mean, it's been happening for decades, don't get me wrong. But a lot of this Marxist socialist agenda, a lot of the psychological warfare that's been happening was really laid in the foundation between those first two terms of Barack Obama, and then expanded out until Trump came in 2016. So talk to me a little bit about, because I know you had some experience in the intelligence community around 2014 with a lot of the stuff that was going on in Ukraine. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, you did your homework. That's good. So 2014. I was serving in the Pentagon on the Ukraine crisis. I was called in, so I was in another assignment on active duty, a special program in the National Capital Region, and I was basically contacted by someone on the Ukraine crisis that was standing up what became the Ukraine crisis team, because I had interacted with a gentleman from the Defense Intelligence Agency, and he's like, "Hey, Ivan, you tracking what's going on with Crimea, Ukraine?" And I was like, "Come on, dude, how many weeks do you have for me to explain this?" And he's like, "Can you come in tomorrow to start basically coming in and explaining and giving your analytic assessment using all the different sources we're going to give access to be able to advise our decision makers, the National Command Authority, up to and including the President of the United States." And I was like, "Man, I already had pre-planned a little vacation the next couple of days." So anyway, I came in, I think it was a Monday, the following Monday. And so I was called in. So what does that mean? That means I get to observe kind of what's going on. But in addition to what a normal analyst does, I was probably the only guy on the team that is fluent in Russian and then can read and understand very well Ukrainian. Okay. And so that, and there were a couple others that knew Russian and a little bit of Ukrainian, not as good. But then additionally, I was probably the only guy that was really in tune with technology, Twitter, social media at the time. So I immediately in my personal time, when I wasn't working, kind of set all these different alerts to what was going on, similar to how most people do nowadays, making lists on who's creating the most credible content of open source information in Crimea, in Donetsk, in Lugansk, and some of the key thought leaders in Russia and Moscow that were basically independent correspondents, right? So as I'm observing this, I had recently, well, in 2010, had become a Green Beret, had served. And so a Green Beret's kind of staple mission is unconventional warfare, where you are tasked by the U.S. government to go into another country, train, advise, and equip an insurgent force to overthrow their government so that that government is now friendly to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So knowing that, I can pick up on the indicators of when that's occurring. So as I'm observing, it's clear that Russia is doing exactly that in response to what John Brennan just did by conducting a flip of the government, right? As the director of the CIA. Again, everything I'm saying is what I learned and researched and obtained in terms of evidence and information in my own personal time and capacity when I wasn't working, okay? That way I'm safe when I explain everything, because it's all publicly out there. So as I'm looking at CommieTube, I see video. As I'm looking at Twitter, I see all this stuff. I'm like, oh wow, this is what's going on here. This is who's going to be this. Here's their acting minister of defense to the little green men and all that. And so while I'm doing that, I'm also really looking at the geopolitical situation, and I observe John Brennan traveling to Ukraine, and I observed failed Vice President Biden traveling in there as he tees up his son Hunter to be the guy that creates unconventional ways in which for Ukraine to develop their economy with their newly installed Petro Poroshenko. Okay. Where the subject matter expertise of Hunter Biden is his olfactory senses, right? Right nostril sniffs out the gas fields and left nostril sniffs out the oil fields. Okay. For Burisma, of course.
Right.
So that he could get $1 million a year and 10% for the big guy. It was a boilerplate sort of contract that Tony Bobolinsky had already shared with us, whether it was on Tucker in October of 2020 or whether it was during his testimony where I sat right behind him a couple months ago. So I don't know where you want to take this, but I can go at length in any
Yeah.
direction that you want. But to answer your question originally, yes, 10 years ago, I had a front row seat to everything that's now coming out subsequent to that, like what Mike Benz talks about. Yeah, I observed it firsthand in 2014 in the Pentagon. What oversight committee Jim Comer is talking about, the financial dealings, like I didn't know all those details. I suspected it based on what I observed in 2014. Now, you got to build more and more evidence to start getting things out there. But I mean, when no one was doing anything, I thought, I'm just going to start investigating on my own and putting the stuff out there, and we'll see where it leads. And it seems as though I've come out as one of the key voices at a granular level to inform people on who, what, when, where, and why. And
Right.
I'm just continuing that.
So I like to build foundations that kind of work on, especially when we're extrapolating information and putting it out there. So for the audience out there, Ukraine was kind of this money laundering hub for federal governments and for the IMF, utilizing Ukrainian banks. They would go out there, take IMF loans. The banks would default. The people would be privy to the loans, and the government would take the money, hand it out to NGOs, nonprofits, funnel it back to American politicians. And this has been going on for decades in Ukraine. You had Yanukovych before Poroshenko, and he was really pro-Kremlin. He kind of was more sided with Putin. Yeah, Yanukovych, who was very pro-Kremlin. But during that same time, you had something else that was going on. You had Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State doing deals with Putin with the Uranium One scandal. And this was the United States Uranium going through Uranium One Company, which Trudeau owned a portion of out of Canada.
You want details on that? Talk to Nate Kane. Have you had him already?
Yep. I've not had Nate Kane. I've researched it as well. And what was going on is Russia was just a proxy for Iran, right? So we're funneling U.S. uranium to Iran through Russia. But then this sets up the rhetoric that we kind of get with Hillary Clinton in 2015, 2016, going after Putin talking about leaving the nuclear proliferation treaty. Obviously, they just had the Maidan massacre in Ukraine where they toppled the government. They kicked basically Russia's influence out of Ukraine during that time. They annexed Crimea. They got that out of there because that was a strategic port for them. But when we start looking at around 2015, 2016, what happens politically in the United States? Donald Trump begins to come to the surface. Hillary Clinton is leading the charge. What are your thoughts on kind of what was really happening in Eastern Europe at that time? Do you think that Russia had various different nuke programs occurring in Ukraine prior to the coup attempt in 2014?
So there's a couple things to unpackage there. So the first one is you got to keep in mind from 2012 to 2014, that's when General Flynn was the director of the DIA, and I was an analyst in the Defense Intelligence Agency. And for context and laying the foundation that is going to help us inform into 2015 and 16. But the latter part that you talk about, remember that Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, right? And so a lot of the nuclear capability for the Soviet Union resided in Ukraine. And so I can't tell you with any level of specificity or confidence how much of that capability remained. Now, a lot of it went back during the START treaties and all that, went back into Russia as part of the Defense Threat Reduction Agency enforcement mechanism. How much actually did take place and wasn't just a sleight of hand, it's unclear. But I would say, just as a not very well steeped researcher on that particular component, I would say that it's very likely that there was at least some capability that either remained or Ukraine itself continued, because if it was physically in Ukraine, then the scientists and the managers, etc., the entire ecosystem and infrastructure behind that had to remain for some level of safety to at least off-ramp that capability, right?
Yep.
That could then be at a moment's notice, again, I'm not a nuclear physicist or scientist, but just from a straight up general layman analytic perspective, it would be more than plausible for that capability to remain.
And if Russia was developing nuclear weapons in Ukraine prior to the Maidan massacre and the coup attempt, these locations would have most likely have been Chernobyl, Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, because those are one ways.
Yeah, whatever the previous power plants that they had.
Yep.
It would make sense.
So do you think that this is one of the main reasons when Russia went in on its small military operation, that those were the first two places that it took control of?
So when you're looking at things from a strategic perspective, which I mean, Putin is a strategically minded leader because he's been in power he's probably the longest serving head of state in the world of the 193 countries. I get it. He was prime minister. They played a little castling with Medvedev, but he was, at the end of the day, he's the leader. It's going back to what, 2000. So we're going on 24, 25 years if you count his time as prime minister when Putin was drunk and basically incompetent. So 25 years, right? So you want to retain influence in, international relations theory 101. You want to have sovereignty. Once you have sovereignty, then you go for regional dominance. And then after you have that, then you go for global hegemony. So I think Russia's take on that is the very first thing that they went after was the most strategically important piece of territory, which was Crimea. It's the only warm water port that Russia has, right, with a standing naval capability into Europe. So obviously that's something that they want to retain. And so that's why they went after it first. And considering the historical components of it, it was gifted to Ukraine because it was Russian, it was part of the Russian Federation, gifted territory during the Soviet times, right, to Ukraine. So I guess the next thing I would say would be, I mean, you want to maintain influence over those things that have strategic economic and military capability. And then also you want to mitigate any risk if something that Ukraine has that you had influence over because you had a friendly head of state in Ukraine from the Russia's perspective. And so you want to seize and have some semblance of control over risky areas, which would have been the nuclear. Again, I'm not saying this with any sort of substantive research evidence. I'm just giving you, based on what you're telling me, my background knowledge of that area, my general overall analytic perspective.
And it's top notch, man. So we're on the same page with all of this. So 2014, now we go into 2015, 2016. Obviously, we have the 16-year plan that is meant to play out. 8 years of Barack Obama, 8 years of Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton's meant to come in as president, selected, not elected.
I'm sorry. I'm reading the comments. If I said Putin, I did mean Yeltsin.
Yeltsin.
This is my 10th podcast today, so bear with me. It seems like my 10th one.
So Hillary Clinton comes out and immediately they start the Russian rhetoric. We have Putin talking about leaving the nuclear proliferation treaty. We know that 16-year plan, the first 2 years at that point in time, Alex Jones, all these guys were talking about it, was nuclear war with Russia, pandemic outbreak, and then move into one world governments. Obviously, that didn't happen. Donald Trump kind of threw a fork in the wheel and caused Hillary Clinton to stumble out. But there's some interesting parts about this because now this goes to 2019 and the second Ukraine phone call, or the Ukraine phone call and the second impeachment with Donald Trump and Zelensky. When Donald Trump asked Zelensky, hey, do you have the server? CrowdStrike, Burisma. I would like to have my attorney general take a look at that. And this goes back to the 2015, 2016 timeframe because
I would like my attorney to look at it.
Right.
So no, I thought you said attorney at the time was Giuliani. Okay. The attorney general was the Bush emplaced leveraging the relationship with Mike Pence to tee up the attorney general so that he would be there to provide cover for the Biden for the uniparty deep state. Since Jim Comey was fired, they had to have a Bushy in there to protect their interests, which would have been Barr, right?
Yep. So,
but anyway, that's another tangent and discussion. Keep going.
So is it in your perspective that CrowdStrike server bought and paid for by the DNC, installed by CrowdStrike at Burisma, which Devin Archer, John Kerry's son, Hunter
Dude,
Biden were working
I don't
at?
think we've ever met, but you've done your research, brother. I like this. All right. I like this podcast.
So the interesting thing about Burisma is this is in the eastern region of Ukraine. So it's close proximity to Russia. So if you're looking to steal an election, and you want to, if you get caught, you want to be able to blame it on Russia. How do you spoof those IPs? Well, you have to have close geolocational proximity. So my thoughts, my research has shown that that server by CrowdStrike was running the software to steal the election that night for Hillary Clinton. And it had close geolocation proximity to Russia. But we know 9 p.m. that night, that server went offline.
Okay, so I don't disagree with you. I have not done the research into that component as it relates to the 2016 election, because you're referring to the 2016
Correct.
election.
2016
what I
election.
will add to that you might know, it sounds like you probably know, is that some key individuals that people need to understand that have ties to Ukraine is, wait, who is the CEO of CrowdStrike? And where is he originally from? Ukraine, Alperovich. Okay. Mm-hmm. I haven't done a deep dive like I normally do with folks on that dude. That might be the next guy I do a little deep dive on.
I'm taking notes now.
When I say deep dive, I'm talking a full cleansing colonoscopy from birth, every second of his life, to today. Okay. So the other person to take a look at as it relates to all this, and this is not so much 2016, but as it goes forward, is the disinformation diva. Remember Nina Yankowicz?
Mm-hmm.
She was at Zelensky's campaign headquarters working her thing in Kiev during his campaign. So when you start pulling all these little threads, you come up with one category of my deep state target lists. Some of the names you've mentioned. That's only one small category. When you talk about the first impeachment, the first impeachment is a byproduct to create a cover-up scheme for the previous cover-up known as the Mueller investigation. The Mueller investigation was created to cover up for the previous illegal spying operation on the Trump campaign and General Flynn and Carter Papadopoulos. So, in the sequence of events, illegally spy, oh crap, Trump wins. Let's cover up. Let's create a Mueller team. Oh crap, there's nothing to find. No Russia, Russia, Russia. Let's institutionalize a section in the FBI known as the Foreign Influence Task Force to make it look like and create another line item congressional funding stream to perpetuate the Russia, Russia, Russia. And then the Mueller team. And then when that fails because he's got dementia, because he's got to testify, not Andy Weissman, who's the deputy that ran that Mueller Russia, Russia scheme to destroy families and lie to the American public, then you create the impeachment hoax. Why? Because it was Eric Ciaramella with the two traitor twin Vindman brothers and their two attorneys, Andrew Bakaj, former John Brennan attorney at the CIA, and Mark Zaid, over the guy that said DNC, within hours of the inauguration on January 20th, 2017. And now, well, I can't remember the exact terminology, and now the resistance begins. So those individuals worked with Weissman. I don't have the evidence for it, but they had to then create, and then also with, who was the lead impeachment manager for Impeachment Hoax 1? Adam Bullshift, the chair of HIPSI, right? To go ahead and create the team, along with folks I'm sure at the FBI, the supervisory intel analyst at Crossfire Hurricane, later becomes the senior intel analyst at the Foreign Influence Task Force, to then create the impeachment hoax. Meanwhile, he's sitting on the Biden criminal syndicate laptop that was provided to FBI, but this guy Auten is safely and securing it. At the same time, Auten and his boss, Laura Demlow, is coordinating with Jim Baker over at Twitter 1.0, who used to be the general counsel at FBI East Coast and authorized the Crossfire Hurricane op. And then they coordinate with the San Francisco field office, Elvis Chan, and maybe Joe Pientka III, who was the supervisory special agent on Crossfire Hurricane, who worked for Peter Strzok and worked with Mike Pence's chief of staff's wife, Catherine Seaman. So again, going back to my introduction, San Francisco, Silicon Valley,
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. I may know a person or two or dozens that can confirm the entire scheme, which means that I'm begging for people to join me in making August 2024 Joseph Pientka Awareness Month, because he was the only one, along with Jim Baker, that was D.C. during the Crossfire, the original transgression, and then sent over to San Francisco for the subsequent cover-ups to the original transgression on using big tech to coordinate that. And so Jim Baker was complicit in all of it criminally. My research shows that Joe Pientka, best case scenario, was the worst case scenario that I've seen, was the least criminally liable in all of this. But there's a good chance that, based on what I've read and seen him report, as soon as he saw that there was a political, illegitimate nexus and reason and predicate for these things, he pulled himself out of Crossfire Hurricane, went back to WFO, and then he left to go to San Francisco. So did he know that it was going on? Oh, almost certainly.
Had to have.
Was he involved? My evidence doesn't show that. I'm not saying that it's possible he was, but I haven't seen anything. So that's why I'm calling on Joseph Pientka III Awareness Month, and for people to be aware that he is our best case scenario whistleblower to take down Jim Comey, Andy McCabe, Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, Kevin Kleinsmith, Catherine Seaman, Bill Priestap, Sussman, all of them. Heck, to include John Durham, who was part of the cover-up crew, although a little bit more delicate and elegant. He was just there to protect the institution's rot.
Yep.
But it made it look like, oh, look, I'm doing something. I'm bringing forth 2 prosecutions that both failed.
Well, Horowitz, same thing. Horowitz on the Clinton emails. I mean, didn't bring about
the
shit.
IG. You're talking about the IG, right? Yeah, DOJ IG. So yeah. By the way, since we're talking about Joseph Pientka III, I always like to remind folks that
Want me to show his information?
Yeah, he's still in the San Francisco field office, and I'm not asking anyone to call him, but I just want you to know that his phone number is 415-553-7400. Okay? And he's at the 450 Golden Gate Avenue, 13th floor in San Francisco. And if I sent you something, you mind pulling up his photo if you scroll down?
Yeah, give me 1 second. Oh, there
if I sent you a link, are you able to put it up?
Yeah.
Actually, wait, do I have a streaming capability too? No. Yeah, so this is the only picture that I've been able to find from about, I think it was 10 years ago, of Joseph Pientka III. This is from the FBI's own content production team on the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, which begs the question, if you're in San Francisco, let me just put it this way. August is going to be nice, right? So we're giving him an opportunity before September 3rd to come out as a whistleblower. And we're just trying to motivate him to do the right thing, legally, morally, and ethically. One way to do that is for people to understand who he is and what information he's sitting on. Again, he saw and knows all the illegal defrauding of the FISA court by Kevin Kleinsmith, Brian Otten, and on up the chain of command. Okay? He knows about the refusal to do a polygraph on Igor Danchenko to protect that source, right? So that they could continue to pay him and perpetuate the BS, I guess, and not show, hey, actually, Igor Danchenko might be a Russian plant. I don't know if he is or not. I'm just saying that there was not extra vetting done, which would have been appropriate on Igor Danchenko. How do I know? I mean, I sat through the whole trial. I sat right behind Igor Danchenko and his wife as I observed and listened, and as I looked and spoke on occasion to John Durham while he was there. Again, I'm an independent observer of all these things. As Brian Otten came in and testified, yes. As Timmy T, I can't remember, all those people. It was a week long. So Joe Pienka knows all these people. He worked with them on Crossfire Hurricane, and he's got dirt on all of them. Okay? And then same thing with Jim Baker. So you're telling me that if Jim Baker was working at Twitter 1.0 headquarters, which is 4 blocks south, line of sight as you look up out the window on the north side of Twitter headquarters, you can, if you're on the higher floor, you can likely see the 13th floor 4 blocks away where Joseph Pienka may have worked in that line of sight. You're telling me that those two people that used to be senior level folks at FBI headquarters worked on Crossfire Hurricane didn't talk to each other when they were in San Francisco now? I mean, which retard believes that?
Right.
You would have to prove me otherwise to convince me. You would have to show me all your phone, all your devices, your phone log, your text message log, all your digital devices, all the apps that you use, your emails,
your Xbox 360 live
and
chat
then show
forum.
me that. Look through everything. I didn't talk to him. And then I'll be like, you know what? Okay. I'm starting to believe you. Now, what may they have talked about? I don't know. Why doesn't Ken Paxton subpoena that now that Elon Musk moved Twitter to Texas? Why doesn't he subpoena everybody on my deep state target list?
Well, and Ken Paxton is
that
gonna go postal on these son of a bitches too, because they tried to attack him, try to get rid of him, and now they just started the investigation within the Texas Senate to investigate it. It could open up some big shit. But also, there's Texas is a beautiful thing because
it is
2020, after the fraud of an election, Texas was the first state to basically stand up and say bullshit and actually file complaints with SCOTUS.
Yes. Texas versus Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
Unfortunately, they're going to have to do it again in 2025. I think that's what's coming. But we can talk about that in a minute. Let's get to 2025 first, because a lot of things have happened from 2016 to current date, especially with all of this. Now, 2 important dates that I like to put out when we're talking about Crossfire Hurricane, at least the Crossfire Hurricane binder that Donald Trump was able to gather all the evidence, all the information, is September 12th, 2020 and December 20th, 2020. These are the 2 dates that Donald Trump made tweets on Twitter saying, I hereby declassify all documents pertaining to Crossfire Hurricane and the Hillary Clinton email investigation. He did the same tweet twice, September 12th and December 20th. And this came before, obviously, he sent these for redaction to the FBI. The redactions came back on January 18th. He left office on the 20th. What happened on the 20th when Biden came in? Didn't they reclassify it under threats of national security?
So here's what's going on. In the most simple terms, the very people that conducted the illegal spying op, that have conducted all the criminal escalatory cover-ups,
Mm-hmm.
that information and all the documents related to it was declassified by
Mm-hmm.
President Trump. The very individual criminals of the information which would prove their criminality, those same people raided Mar-a-Lago to re-seize that so it wouldn't be used in the RICO case against them, and it wouldn't be by Trump, and then it wouldn't be used in the civil case, similar RICO style, by General Flynn in his case. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
This is the biggest criminal syndicate conspiracy in America's history. And if you want to know the names of all those players, read my deep state target list.
Yep.
By category. Yes.
So
I've already listed quite a few of them on the FBI side of it, but
Yeah.
we haven't even talked about the 51 spies who lied, one of them being David Buckley, who ended up ultimately being Mike Pence's beloved Liz Cheney and Nancy Pelosi's beloved Benny Thompson's staff director for the J6 cover-up committee. David Buckley was one of the 51 spies who lied. He used to be the HIPSI staff director for the Democrats. He used to be the inspector general for John Brennan's CIA. This is all incestuous generational criminal syndicate stuff. Once you start peeling the onion and going into detailed link analysis, timeline, chronology, and applying all the different structured analytic techniques that I used to build and train and develop the next generation intelligence analysts in our U.S. intelligence community. I do it on my own as a hobby, creating the deep state target list, applying that to how do we address them lawfully and constitutionally? And that's what I've come up with. The list. Hey, Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger, tell Elon to have him search and the team to match all Twitter holdings with all of these people's communications, and you will prove beyond any doubt to the American Court of Public Opinion with the Twitter files dump known as the mother of all Twitter files, so that everybody in the country is clamoring and demanding for a free and fair election that can remedy it. And the only way to have that free and fair election with the time that we have left is to educate the country of the illegal 2020 election, the Fauci files, the COVID con, you name every single thing that you and I know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now it educates the whole country at scale, because Elon is now number 3 above Facebook and Insta garbage and is about to overtake CommieTube and CommieSearch, so that it circumvents and is on par and beyond what the disinformation reach is of the Washington Compost, the New Woke Slimes, Raw Sewage, Fakebook, Insta garbage, right? All these in the collective. And now America's like, oh, wow, those conspiracy theorists were actually conspiracy oracles. And now we believe them. And now we're kind of saddened to see that it's a total illegitimate regime. How do we fix it? Well, how do we fix it? Let's go to Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution and have our state legislatures vote by state legislative body on November 5th or earlier on allocating those states' electors. And if everyone votes by political party, meaning state rep, state senator, we already know if they're a Republican or Democrat. If everybody votes under that framework, 274 electoral votes are controlled by Republican majority legislatures. And if we watch them do the vote live on X, Rumble, Truth Social, live streamed, I suspect that there probably will not be a single Republican that will be able to vote for the Democrat slate of electors, because everyone will know their name and everybody will know how to deal with them if they vote that way. That is their constituent pool. So that's the solution. And then with a President Trump in play and an A.G. Paxton working with Elon Musk with the biggest trove of criminal evidence known that any human has ever had in human history, meaning the Twitter files, you put those two together. So imagine this. You got a vice on top, the presidency, up against the FBI, CIA, national security state, hopefully with a advisor known as General Flynn. And then from the ground up, you have Paxton and Elon. That deep state target list will be actioned in a very quick manner. And there's about 80,000 of us that were kicked out of the military or left early due to the illegal jab mandate that are still within our prime that would be honored to be deputized by local sheriffs, the 2,500 red sheriffs, or the 24 plus attorneys general in this country to do the precedent set by them. Meaning, what did they do to Roger Stone? A live stream SWAT raid. What did they do to Peter Navarro? An armed robbery. What about, and he was kidnapped also. So was Roger Stone. So kidnapped, armed robbery, live stream SWAT raids. And you know what? We may not stop there. We may just conduct objectively reasonable conduct, similar to Michael Byrd on what he did to Ashley Babbitt. We may conduct objectively reasonable activity like D.C. Metropolitan Police Department Officer Lila Morris conducted on Roseanne Boyland. See where I'm getting at?
I do.
They called it objectively reasonable, set the precedent. Fulton Fanny set the precedent out there in Georgia. Fat Albert Bragg set the precedent for DAs in Manhattan. Why can't 2,500 red DAs conduct the same precedent against my deep state target list? Why can't sheriffs conduct the same precedent that I just outlined that was conducted on Roseanne Boyland and Ashley Babbitt on January 6th? They were law enforcement. Sheriffs are law enforcement. They set the precedent. Now we work the problem and continue their precedent. And while I'm explaining this, Jamie Ratskin is so disturbed that I'm making my First Amendment protected sounds, explaining how we organize the nation, how we advise, train, and equip Elon Musk, Ken Paxton, and the rest of the AGs in America to move in this direction.
Well, people like that don't want to hear it. Yeah, people like that don't want to hear it. I mean, Jamie Raskin yesterday. I've had this theory for about a year and a half now. I said that, look, there's no way that Donald Trump is going to lose this election unless there isn't an election or he's dead. Obviously, they went for number 2, and now they're going to try to go to number 3 with everything that's happening right now, World War III, so forth. But
nothing's off the table for them.
Correct. 16 House Republicans, rhinos, are not running for re-election. They all took DNC PAC money. Matt Gaetz called them out about 9 months ago about this. Each one of them is in a contested district in the sense where 49 to 51% of the vote is what will tip the tides. They don't need hundreds of thousands of votes for the Democrats to take over those districts. They need hundreds or thousands, which means that there's a good chance that they could utilize their influence, utilize their vote peddling to steal those House seats to flip the House. Jamie Raskin just said yesterday on January 6th, projection. We got inversion and projection. Exactly what we tried to do on January 6, 2020, they're going to do on January 6, 2025. They'll have the new Congress in place on January 3rd. They'll come in and they will reject the election results, send them back to the states, and coup it that way, and put it and appoint an interim president. It's a possibility.
I partially agree. So here's what Jamie Raskin's play is. He's already indicated it.
Yeah.
So, and they're going to work with. So there's a couple things going on here. This is how I see it. So Kevin McCarthy is vying to be the chief of staff. So the way that they could, one course of action is that they allow President Trump to win the election, have Kevin McCarthy as the chief of staff, which basically will act as the Mike Pence of the second term, and make sure that only the information that they want President Trump to have is received, and then he makes his decisions in that manner so that it protects the previous 10 years of actioning the deep state target list, right? But it doesn't matter. So my plan and path forward assumes that there is no President Trump. It assumes the worst case scenario.
Yep.
That's why I'm incorporating, with or without an election, with or without a President Trump, we have to create a method and mechanism to body check these scum. Elon Musk, A.G. Paxson, we got that in play. Okay. Now, if there is a President Trump, it makes it a lot easier. I get it. It'd be helpful. But they're looking at different courses of action, like, ooh, the assassination attempt failed. They're probably going to continue to try to assassinate him, right? That's number one. Number two, cyber, they're going to try to shut things down. FBI and CISA just came out with their little thing last week saying that they're going to do a DDoS on probably Twitter or X and other places so that they can control the narrative going into the election. They already gave that, tipped their hand. The other thing is, I interpret that as, hey, we're going to stop the mother of all Twitter files from being released. You saw that, right? The CISA FBI document, the public service announcement. Well, I got a public service announcement for you, Chris Ray, and was her Jennifer Easterly, who's the director of the CISA. You just wait and see, right? You are on our list. You will be addressed in kind. You set the precedent, and you're going to create. You're setting yourself up for max retribution. Now let's put that aside. Jamie Raskin is going to use the Supreme Court ruling that they did in Colorado, where basically the dictate said, in order to enforce the 14th Amendment, Section 3, which is the insurrection and you can't run for office section, it's up to the House, right? It's up to Congress to enforce that. So what does that mean? It means that if they let President Trump win, then they win the House. They win the House if President and McCarthy is going to basically say, hey, Trump, if you don't choose me as your chief of staff, I am going to use my Congressional Leadership Fund, PAC money that is flush with FTX, right? Laundered Ukraine money, to then make sure that the House is a Democrat-controlled House, so that Jamie Raskin and company have two options. They either vote to call you an insurrectionist under 14th Amendment Section 3, removing you from being a president, or two, they immediately impeach you. Now, the first option is safer for them because it removes Trump. And let's face it, J.D. Vance has no clue what he's doing if he becomes president. Okay? Absolutely zero understanding of the deep state. He knows less about the deep state than even Vivek Ramaswamy. Okay? So that would be their play. Like if I were advising them, they already know this, that would be their strongest play. That's why it's so important to expose everything that I've said so far, and we need to have a Republican-controlled House so that we can, at a minimum, so that we can conduct the maximal retribution play. And Trump can do that, right?
Yep.
So who's the biggest threat to a Democrat House? It's Kevin McCarthy. And when you start to thread the needle, who in the Trump campaign at the highest levels does Kevin McCarthy have the most leverage and influence with?
In the Trump campaign currently.
Yes. That is why I'm not going to name them. Those that are on the know exactly who I'm talking about. And that is why it is
the
very
orgy
important.
Leverage.
Huh?
The orgy leverage.
It is important to have. I don't know what that's all about.
Kevin McCarthy was hosting orgies in Washington, D.C. That's you
remember to Madison Cawthorn,
yeah, Madison.
So Kevin McCarthy's still in the mix, folks. So Matt Gaetz, I know you love him as much as I do. And so Matt Gaetz and those that are aligned, we need to continue to remove Kevin McCarthy's influence from this equation, because he is going to be the single most influential force to continue the cover-up scheme. So Elon, if you're listening in, make note of that and take a look at Kevin McCarthy's communications with folks at Twitter as it relates to who he asked to be censored. I wonder if I was one of them. Next thing I'll say, since we're on that note, Kamala Harris's comms team used to work at Twitter 1.0. I wonder what we're going to glean from those communications. Sir, all of them. Remember, if you're a Twitter employee, Jim Baker, or Kamala Harris's comms team, I'll have to go back because I did this research years ago. I'll get the names of the individuals now that she is the supposed, at least until the DNC convention, the nominee, at least in the court of public opinion for now. I mean, we can wipe them out. How? If you're a Twitter employee, you probably had a Twitter-issued cell phone, tablet, computer, email address, right? I want to see all of that. And Elon Musk can see all of that. And A.G. Paxton can subpoena all of that. Now you see why they were going after him in the impeachment?
Yeah.
They're making their moves, but we're sitting. Having Elon Musk in our corner buying Twitter, bro, he like they have a royal flush against us. Elon Musk is walking in with 5 aces. So if you know anything about poker, a 5 of a kind, aces, beats a royal flush. But you have to have a couple decks.
So it's interesting too, because I mean, after the Trump attempted assassination, we had capitulation from a lot in the Silicon Valley. Mark Andreessen, we had Elon Musk endorsing Donald Trump, which I think that he took away. But then we have J.D. Vance being selected as the VP, which is Peter Thiel, Palantir. So you have a lot of the big tech swamping over there. Just the other day, Donald Trump said Mark Zuckerberg called him up and said, "I'm not voting Democrat. I'm really sorry for what happened." Like, what the hell is going on? Well, I think they're understanding that nothing can really stop what's coming here and that they have to play ball. And on the sense of Elon Musk, he was on the tech transition team as well as Peter Thiel when Trump came in 2016, and they're going to be on most likely coming on in 2025. So I'm curious of what role Elon will play in that, in the sense of, is there going to be a special prosecutor? Is information going to be given? I believe so. I think that that's why they took the shot at them, because like Hillary said, if he gets in the office, we're all going to hang. And I think that they understand that this house of cards is coming crashing down. But what are your thoughts on it, in the sense of Elon, how this is going to play out with Trump 2025 and the next term?
Okay, so first thing I'll say is they're going to do everything in their power to stop Trump from becoming the president.
They'll scorch this earth before they ever give up power. That's my famous quote.
Whatever this guy can think of, they're going to try to do. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's first and foremost. So if he survives physically, if Paul Ryan, remember, Paul Ryan facilitated an $850 million bribe to deviant voting systems. Remember that settlement?
Mm-hmm.
What was the return on that? They bought the electoral outcome of their choosing for the general election. I said that literally as soon as that occurred. I was like, Paul Ryan just bribed an electoral outcome of his choosing in 28 states that deviant voting system has a touch point in. That's if we run elections how we ran elections in 2020. The only way we circumvent that is under the play that I explained, is that we force the state legislatures to vote by by each state legislature, and we know who's, Republican, Democrat. We go that. I don't know. Did I mention that right?
You did. For the 270 electors, it's under
Yeah,
Article 2.
274 electors are controlled by Republican legislatures. Now, I want to talk about the J.D. Vance aspect.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a little insight that maybe most people don't. So, for full disclosure, in 2018, 2017, I ran a exploratory committee for running for U.S. Senate in Virginia. As part of that, before that, I basically ran across Virginia 22 miles a day to bring awareness to the veteran suicide issue, right? And I ran for 81 days, culminating in a 1,776-mile run across every county and city, 133 jurisdictions in Virginia. As part of that, before I started that, I went down the list of, because I'm not naive, in some areas I may be, you have to have resourcing and funding to run for a consequential seat known as the United States Senate, particularly when you're removing Tim Kaine, who was the VP pick for Hillary, right? When you're trying to remove that level of person that is, generationally in the political scheme. So how do you do that as an they call it insurgent candidate? Well, you got to go down the billionaire list. And then you got to go down who is most closely aligned to my style of values and campaign. Obviously, I'm not going to find someone exactly aligned with me, but I'm trying to find someone at the very top of that billionaire list that is as closely aligned with some of the things that I'm campaigning on. I was talking about AI way before Andrew Yang, right? A couple years before. Again, remember my background? Silicon Valley AI Tech Scout, reserves, instructor at the Defense Intelligence Agency. So, you get it. So the first person that comes to mind, the iconoclast, is Peter Thiel. Why? Well, when I was at the Defense Intelligence Agency, when General Flynn was the director, the very first thing that he did as director was create an innovation seminar series where he brought in critical thinking. The term iconoclast is probably the most accurate depiction, which would be a person that thinks and acts completely against the traditional standard expected norm, but not in a whimsical, belligerent manner. They do it and they end up being right and then create a windfall success for themselves. And so who in Silicon Valley is the number one iconoclast? So if you follow his career like I did, going back to the days of the original X, got to remember that X was originally a payment processing company, and Elon Musk met with Peter Thiel, and then that merged with a company called PayPal, and Elon Musk was the last, and PayPal CEO Peter Thiel was the last boss of Elon Musk. Okay. So he was brought in to this seminar series, and I happened to be in attendance. And the conclusion of Peter Thiel's speech, they opened it up for questions. No one in the audience had the understanding and context to know what to even ask. Knowing my background and where I focused my energies and attention to, I obviously asked the first question and the next question and so on and so forth. Okay. So fast forward. As I'm contemplating running for U.S. Senate, I reach out to Mr. Peter Thiel and I said, I'd like to have a meeting with you to discuss my Senate run. We have I think it was a 2-hour meeting in New York. And basically, I was like, this is where I'm at. These are my priorities. This is what I would like to do. I know, generally speaking, about your career. I see that it aligns with my values. If you are aligned with what I'm running for, then I would like your support. That election cycle, he only max donated, or I should say donated, to 3 candidates. Josh Hawley, Kevin McCarthy, and Ivan Raiklin. Okay. When I was going to submit my signatures to get on the ballot for the primary in 2018, I wanted to wait till the day before the last day so that it would be a surprise and then have a day just in case. Well, I was going to have a nice little fundraiser with endorsements from, let's just say, General Flynn. There was representatives from consequential people from Faux News, Twitterati, One American News, etc., that would have been there to basically fall in line behind my campaign so that people would have been like, whoa, this dude came out of nowhere, because I had prepped all this in advance. And it was likely going to be where Peter Thiel was going to go and support me in a much more consequential manner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which probably would have led to a Trump endorsement, which would have boxed out the lead candidate that had a falling out with the Trump campaign. And so then it would have really put me in the strongest position to win the nomination. And then I would have pivoted and started using my Spanish and foreign language expertise to engage and have a debate with Tim Kaine in Spanish, where I would have proceeded to obliterate him, because his claim to fame that he's fluent in Spanish. I've seen him speak in Spanish. It would be so glorious for me to debate him 3 times in Spanish and 3 times in English. Anyhow, going back to Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is very astute. Remember, he was the tech advisor for President Trump in 2016. The only person out of Silicon Valley to come out and support publicly President Trump. And so that background and knowledge, he has an outsized role and influence in the political conversation as it applies to the vice presidential pick, because he's also a significant investor in some of Don Jr.'s business activities. Okay. And he's got a relationship, close, assuming here, with Elon Musk. So I think what happened with the J.D. Vance VP pick, it was a last minute, let's have this guy come in to be able to counterbalance the interests of the Nikki Haley camp, right? The Uniparty camp. Now, let me say, Nikki Haley was going to come in if the assassination was successful. The other wing of the McCarthy wing of the senior people in the campaign, I'll leave it at that, were pushing for, my sources tell me, a Tim Scott or a Marco Rubio. Okay. Now I get it. You're like, oh, you can't have it from the same state. Well, all President Trump would have to do is 90 days before the election, which would be like basically now, change his residence to New Jersey, right? Because he's got Bedminster. So that was not really a big issue. That was that. And then I'm hearing that on the short list was, once again, General Flynn. But because of the conversations and dynamics, I think the Peter Thiel camp and the Elon camp wanted to have J.D. Vance in there. Because remember, Peter Thiel was the biggest, I believe, donor to J.D. Vance for his Senate run.
He was. And J.D. Vance was one of the general counsels at one of Peter Thiel's venture capital companies.
That's right. Was it for Andrew? Not Andrew. What's the name of the company?
I forgot the name of the company, but yeah.
It's one of his venture capital.
He's known J.D. Vance for like 20 years. And so one other aspect of this, because Trump, right after that VP pick, went and spoke at the Bitcoin conference. And now you have Peter Thiel, which is heavily invested into cryptocurrency Bitcoin. He's chairman of a crypto company called Reserve, which seeks to become a reserve currency based on cryptocurrency on a peg stablecoin, which utilizes very similar to the IMF's SDF bucket. It's actually a really great idea. And then you have Palantir, which he's one of the lead investors on, which is one of the largest government contractors in artificial intelligence. So Peter Thiel is heavily influential, and that's why we had Mark Andreessen and Musk and everybody else coming after this.
The combination of Thiel and Musk was really the driving factor for the rest of Silicon Valley to start to pile on, because Elon Musk is very influential in that ecosystem, right? If you think about it, who has the biggest data set for AI development in the United States? Tesla, and from my perspective, is an AI company. It's not a battery company. It's not a car company. It's an AI company. How so? Every single vehicle has, I think, 8 cameras now around it, LiDAR, etc. And that can be connected with 5G and later 6G and Wi-Fi to be able to be literally live stream ways of its entire environment around the vehicle. And when you mesh that with the entire fleet, that is AI to the next level. It's video landscaping of the entire kind of road network in America and the globe, right? And so, being the richest guy in the world, he has network relationships that he's built over from the PayPal days, the PayPal mafia, to the Tesla, the most consequential companies he's the CEO of. And so most of these people don't want to run afoul of him. And I suspect that, enough people monitor. Now that I have my voice back somewhat, I would guess that when my stuff gets 10 million views, some of these consequential figures like Elon and others may have crossed paths with the content to see and know that, oh, wait, Elon just purchased the biggest data set of criminal evidence in the world, which leads to the second part where you said Mark Zuckerberg. I think Mark's calculus is like, best case scenario for him, he was just duped by the FBI and others to censor stuff and this and that, because he may not know. That's best case scenario for him. Worst case scenario, he's like, ooh, Elon's got everything. And maybe if I'm okay, like, I don't know what his calculus other than maybe if I back off, I won't be a high value target that they're going to come after. Let me just kind of that whole the Homer Simpson meme where you're backing out
into the bush. Yeah. So I think with a lot of these people
are just backing out into the bushes.
Exactly. I think a lot of these people are actors and players, is that they follow that power needlessly, because you look at Zuckerberg, right? You had DARPA's Project Lifelog up until January 14th, 2004. It ended on the exact same day that Facebook was created. The project description of Project Lifelog was the exact same damn thing that Facebook did. We know InQtel, CIA's venture capitalist fund, invested primarily in early Facebook. So a lot of the money flowing
pause right there when you say InQtel. Remember, I have a very unique perspective and access to people that not many people have. So when I was a technology scout, my role was to know about the entire tech landscape of Silicon Valley, okay? And other members of my unit. Remember, it's a reserve unit. So I had members in my unit that are full-time doing stuff, say at InQtel, say at Apple, say at et cetera, et cetera. So those are personal relationships that I may or may not be able to tap into to confirm or deny things. Okay.
Yep. So we have Facebook. Facebook and Google were funded early on by the CIA and DARPA. So Zuckerberg was seeded by these people early
Yeah, because they're
on.
right there on Sand Hill Road. They
Yeah.
pitch all these different VCs.
You had Regina Dugan, right? Regina Dugan leave DARPA, go to Google, and then go to Facebook Hangar 8, right? She was the former director over at DARPA. Then she led special projects at Google, and then she goes over to Hangar 8 at Meta and ran the Oculus project and a few other projects over there before leaving. So Zuckerberg is heavily influenced by that back-end intelligence government money. So I think that he is just falling in line with the next selected power base that is going to come into power. Because I think that we've had capitulation and some aspects of Donald Trump that after that bullet missed, I think there's factions of the global cabal that have capitulated and said, we just got it. We got to give it to them. They didn't take him down that time. It's going to be much harder the second time.
Well, I think some of the ones that weren't as directly involved are like, oh, crap. We want to distance ourselves because the truth's going to come out, and they're going to link it to some of the key globalists that were involved in the assassination attempt, right? And so I think some of these,
Weiss,
they
Soros.
may have known about it. They're like, you know what? We don't want any of our fingerprints here. The proverbial backing into the bushes. Like, we want to go as far away as possible and let's just say neutral. Speaking of Oculus, another Silicon Valley, LA based now, individual is Palmer Luckey, who was the original CEO of Oculus. He hosted the last massive fundraiser for President Trump, I think late October of 2020, just before, like days before the election, in his home in Southern California. So he Oculus, and then he later founded a company, co-founded it with it was Palmer Luckey's the CEO, and what's his name? Trey Stevens. Trey Stevens is also in the teal orbit. Okay, so these are some of the names that, again, I got no issue with these guys. I've talked to Trey. I've talked to Peter. I mean, I'm not close or tight with these guys, but I have the ability to interact with them. It's up to them, right, to respond to me. But I think the J.D. Vance VP pick was not the ideal pick, but it was the pick that was allowed to take place.
To get the Silicon Valley support. Yeah.
It was a compromise, last-minute move, in my opinion.
I agree with you. 100%.
So that the Uniparty's Tim Scott and the Uniparty's Marco Rubio would not be the VP pick. Because, I mean, imagine this. Imagine General Flynn being VP.
Oh, they would both be getting shot at.
Under the current dynamics. The whole, like,
I think Flynn
happens quick.
Well, I think Flynn is more suited for Director of National Intelligence, and retired Major General Dan Kane, who led the special operations assault and eliminated ISIS in Afghanistan in 6 months that Donald Trump talks about all the time. I think he potentially will come in as Secretary of Defense. I think he's got a lot of good patriots that are coming in.
Don't forget, you have Chris Miller was the Secretary of Defense.
Yeah, he was awesome. But I think we'll see what happens with Trump V2. Ivan, I've been putting your links out. We got your Substack and we got your Twitter right here. So for everybody who wants to visit Ivan, you can go to x.com. It's Ivan Raiklin / Ivan Raiklin.
Before we finish, can I?
Yep.
You sent me an email, right? Can I send you something to that?
Yeah, sure. Go right ahead.
That you can post up?
No problem.
What's the email address?
Should be redpillprojectonline@gmail.
Get so much. Red Pill Project. Can you send me a note so I can respond to you with this?
Yeah.
Because I really want to put this up there. It's very important.
Coming at you.
Or actually, what is it? Red Pill Project?
Yeah, Red Pill Project Online. You should be getting an email right now. Bing.
There it is. I got it.
But so everybody out there, I am putting his links in here right now, so you can go follow Ivan on X as well on his Substack.
Yeah, X, Rumble, some of these other ones. But this is probably the most important thing I wanted to show you to contextualize this whole conspiratorial scheme.
All right.
Okay. There we go. It's an X post that I posted, and I'd like you to pull it up, and then we'll discuss it real quick.
Perfect.
Yes. There we go. Hopefully you got it.
Waiting still. Google has to look at it and analyze it first to see
before, determine whether to censor it or not.
Yeah.
I got it.
All right.
So
There we go.
You got it?
Yep, I got it. Pulling it up now.
All right, let's pull that up. Just pull up the picture first. There's 3 little attachments on that on that tweet. And while you pull it up, I think it's 415-553-7400. 415-553-7400. Don't call that. And don't ask for Joe Pientka to be a whistleblower by September 3rd. All right, so
nice.
Pull up that picture and get it big.
Right.
So up top, that smiley face is FBI's San Francisco field office on the 13th floor. And then the smiley face down at the bottom is Twitter headquarters. That's 4 blocks. Now let's take a look at a 3D version of that by clicking on the next video. That's the federal building where the FBI's office in San Francisco is, on the 13th floor, where Joe Pientka's office is. Okay. 450 Golden Gate. Oh, what is it? Avenue. If you care to walk by it in the public easement. Okay. If you go to the third one, that's the perspective from the top or the rooftop of Twitter headquarters over to the FBI building 4 blocks north. Okay. See that? X headquarters, that building over there?
Mm-hmm.
Line of sight, huh? You're telling me that Jim Baker and Joe Pientka never talked to each other? They used to be senior officials at the FBI headquarters, and then they both went over to San Francisco, one and the other 4 blocks from each other? Ken Paxton. Hey, Catherine Engelbrecht. You might want to geolocate their devices for the history of the time that they have had their devices, while Ken Paxton subpoenas them. And while Elon Musk hires Joe Pientka after he retires in the next few weeks, as he builds the trust and safety at X in Texas, provides top cover immunity protection to Joe Pientka as he takes the entire system down.
Wouldn't that be great?
So, Joe Pientka, I dedicate August as Joe Pientka Awareness Month.
Fantastic. God. Guys, go on over to Ivan's X account. Give him a follow. He is absolutely awesome, amazing, a great patriot.
Dude, this is a great show, man. You've been doing your research. I'm going to learn. We need to do more of these. I'm going to learn a lot from you.
Well, hang out for a minute. Let me get the show done, and we'll talk for a minute. But hey, guys, We'll be back with you tomorrow night, 8:30 p.m. with another episode of The Daily Dose. Visit Ivan over there on X at Ivan Raiklin, as well as his Substack. He is all linked up on, you can go to his X account and you can click on the links and you can find his Rumble and everything out. Ivan, what's your Rumble channel?
Just type in my last name, Raiklin, and you'll find it.
Perfect. All right, guys. Much love, respect. God bless. Take care. Have a great night. We'll see you guys again tomorrow.
Spoon. That's impossible. Only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.